The rescue team rolls out of the caravan park at 4:30 in the morning, and you'll have 80 vehicles driving in convoy to the wetland. The shooters are usually pretty angry and at seeing 80 vehicles coming onto their supposed territory, and we're there to help the birds, and rescuers go in before the shooters, and we spend the rest of the day keeping birds away from the hunters' guns. The role of a rescuer out there is to go onto the water and to move birds off before shooters take their place on the water. I see our role as being similar to the Red Cross. We go into a war zone to help the innocent victims. We wear bright colours, we blow whistles to keep birds away from the guns. That's as well as picking up wounded birds and any protected species that have been illegally shot. Wounded birds go to our mobile veterinary clinic, where often they come back to Melbourne. Then they go to wildlife carers until they're rehabilitated, where they can go back into the wild again. At the opening weekend, we had a rescuer shot in the face. It was probably one of our worst nightmares that had come true.
We've got a campaigner that's been shot in the face. Bring him in. Got a campaigner shot.
Who's been shot?
One of the rescuers has been shot. Alright,
Yeah,
she's going to be alright.
Luckily, the pellets missed her eyes, otherwise she would have been blinded. She was stretchered to an ambulance, taken to the Horsham Base Hospital. She had pellets removed from her face. It does highlight the courage and the commitment of rescuers over the years, because without that courage and commitment from rescuers, water birds wouldn't have a chance. One would expect politicians to be looking after our native water birds. One would expect the Department of Sustainability and Environment to be looking after our native water birds. Instead, they're the gamekeepers. It's the last place any of our rescuers want to be. We don't want to be out there. We don't want to be out there with guys with guns. So without the Coalition Against Duck Shooting's rescuers out on the wetlands, there'd be no one out there looking out for our native water birds. After the opening weekend, on the Monday morning, we display all the dead birds that we've brought in outside the Premier's office. And the idea of that is to say, Parliament sanctioned this slaughter. Parliament refuses to go to the wetlands to see the carnage, so we bring the carnage to them. We've brought out 630 dead birds. 75 of those were illegally shot protected species, and the other 555 were game species that had been shot by duck shooters and illegally left on the water. They didn't even bother to collect them, and that highlights the thrill-kill nature of duck shooting. The Victorian government shouldn't have called a duck shooting season this year. Most of our wetlands had water for the first time in 13 years. Water birds were breeding for the first time in 13 years. And our wetlands were large nurseries. duck shooters were actually out on those nurseries, and of course it was a bloodbath. We've seen major changes take place in Australia, with Western Australia banning duck shooting in 1990, New South Wales following on in 1995, then Queensland in 2005. And public opinion has changed. Duck shooting is one of those activities that belongs in the 1950s and has absolutely no place in a modern 21st century.